welcome. Super excited to be here. This is an amazing panel we have for you this morning. We're going to talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in November of 2021 that authorized $1.2 trillion in transportation and infrastructure spending and $550 billion towards new investments and programs. Our panelists I'm going to let them introduce them. I'm going to introduce them, and then they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves and why we're all here. Starting to my left, Quincy Allen, Director of District Operations with TxDOT.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I worked in Houston almost my whole life, and now I have an assignment in Austin. But I still work closely with Eliza as she leads the Houston district of TxDOT. We look forward to this exciting time in transportation, and we're working very hard to be ready to deliver. Thank you.
Cam Spencer, Director of Government Relations with Port Houston.
Can you hear me? All right. Thanks, Tricia. Cam Spencer, Director of Government Relations, Port Houston. I've been with the port actually just about a year, so I came out from the West Coast, so very familiar with the port out there. Very familiar with supply chain issues on the West Coast and out the Gulf as well. Port Houston, for those of you who don't know, we are the public port authority of the Houston Ship Channel. So the Ship Channel is about 52 miles long, reaching all the way out to Galveston Bay and starting right up here in the Buffalo Bayou area. And so because of that, we are the local sponsor of the Ship Channel and seen as kind of the guardian, I like to say, of those 52 miles. So there's over 200 private different terminals, industries, businesses, et cetera, that utilize the Ship Channel, have their own private terminals, and then we have the public terminals on our side. So we handle everything from containerized cargo to high and heavy, roll on, roll off cargo, cars, steel, wind turbine blades, Amazon products. So very diverse group of cargo. And we are the #1 port in the nation for waterborne tonnage.
Thank you. David Fields, Chief Transportation Planner for City of Houston.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I'm David Fields, Chief Transportation Planner. So as many of you heard last night, we're a very big city, 2.3 million people. We're also almost 670 square miles. So as context, that's something around 6 Atlantas or 8 Washington, D.C.s. So we have a very, very big job and a very, very simple focused mission. Everybody should be able to get home every single day safely, and we don't do that today. We have a very high crash rate, we have a very high fatality rate on our roads, and our mission is just to make everybody safe again.
Thank you. Roxana O'Rourke, and she's Infrastructure Planning Architect in the Planning Department of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much. I am Roxana O'Rourke. I am an architect, registered architect for the state of Texas. I've been working for the airport for the last 11 years. And we have, as you know, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport is one of the largest.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, in the country, #3 and #4 in operations. And what I can tell you, a fun fact for the airport is that we are larger than the island of Manhattan. And as you may imagine, all the projects that are involved within that footprint is just amazing. We have a lot of work going on right now.
Yep.
And our last speaker is Sam Sargent, Director of Government Affairs for Capital Metro and Austin Transit Partnership.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I see some familiar faces in the room. So my name is Sam Sargent. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Capital Metro, as well as the new Austin Transit Partnership. And the Austin Transit Partnership is a joint venture of the City of Austin and Capital Metro, who is responsible for implementing the voter-approved $7.1 billion transit expansion program that we have in Austin called Project Connect. And I also do federal, state, and local government affairs work for Capital Metro, which is the transportation authority for Central Texas. So glad to be here today.
Thank you. So you can see we have amazing panelists, and there's a lot of them, and they have a lot to say and talk about. Given the IIJA's allocation of to Texas, which was the state to receive the second highest amount of funds from the infrastructure bill, about $35 billion. So these folks are going to talk about sort of how along with the theme that Dave Bullard talked about when he opened the session, about how these agencies are going to prioritize their projects and the funding, with the funding that they're going to receive. So, and we're going to talk about the fact that some of the funding is formula allocated through formula, and some are going to be competitive grants, and everybody's got, you know, something to share. So I think we're going to start with Quincy. I think the initial question is your agency expecting to receive IIJA funds? We know they are, but what types of funds are you looking to receive?
Yes, we expect to receive IIJA funds, funds that we can put directly, you know, to continue to develop our system. I don't know if we need to go to priorities or how we prioritize the projects, but we've looked at congestion, connectivity, the wear of the particular road that we may be working on, the growth in the area and that sort of thing. Certainly safety is our top priority, and we're working very hard, as David said, to reduce those numbers and bring people home safely. Currently, we're losing way too many people each day on our system, and that's going to be our primary focus. But closely behind that is that our populations are growing, and we need to be able to accommodate the transportation needs of people of the state of Texas.
Thank you. And David, I think you had some thoughts on what your agency is going to be doing with funds, what funds it's going after.
So I have to tell you all a secret. In the planning department, we are very bad at keeping secrets. Every single thing I'm about to tell you is on our website. We have been very, very clear over the last 2 years, exactly identifying if and when funds come down, exactly what we'd be going after. So nothing here isn't out there. Every member of the public is aware of it. We've been very clear on what we're trying to achieve. So again, number one has got to be safety. Right now, over 200 people die on our roads every single year. Over 1,000 people are seriously injured. 60% of those crashes happen on only 6% of our streets. So if you want to know where we prioritize, it is those 6% of streets, and half of them are in what our mayor calls his complete communities, places that have historically been underinvested. These are kind of equity type focuses, so we can say to everybody when funds are available through IIJA or anything else, these are the places we're going to look to make every single node safe for every single person.
Cam, how about the Port Authority?
Sure, thanks, Tricia. So as you mentioned earlier, IIJA created some new pots of funding, and then they also through formula funding and then competitive grant programs as well. And so at Port Houston, we did not receive any of the formula funding. That's across the board for the nation's seaports. You probably saw there was about $17 billion that was identified in that funding package to go towards seaports. Those largely are coming through the competitive grant program, so what we call as plus ups. So you're looking at your PIDP, your Port Infrastructure Development Program. You might have seen yesterday, the administration just announced that through appropriations, it would be about $450 million. Last year's cycle was about $200 to $230 million worth of funding. So that's a competitive grant program that Port Houston will be submitting an application for. We were very fortunate in December. We were awarded a grant last cycle for about $18 million for container yard expansion at our Bayport terminal. So we've been successful with those competitive grants before. There's also different programs, whether it's the RAISE grant, Infra grant, CRISI, which is the Railroad Safety Infrastructure Grant. So as a public port authority, we have the ability to partner with different agencies and apply for those funds. With that as well, because we're a public agency, we do go out through the public bidding process, RFPs, et cetera, when we solicit proposals and whatnot once we receive those grants. Along those same lines, in terms of priorities, with every new administration that comes in to the White House, they typically tweak those notice of funding opportunities and the criteria for those different programs. So as you see, based on the priorities of that administration. So what we're seeing a lot of right now is obviously a focus on some of the environmental benefits, a little heavier on that, as well as balancing job creation And then disadvantaged communities, right? So that's a big focus, providing ladders of opportunity to lower income communities across the board. So that's some of our focus with our projects. We have kind of our general projects that we look towards, but then also finding out ways how we can make sure we meet the criteria so that we're much more competitive. One last point on that is we've seen success with applying for projects that are complete projects. So instead of doing, a phase one, really showing in our applications the high, benefit cost ratio, the immediate benefits to the American citizens for port infrastructure projects.
Sam, do you want to talk about what the hoops, are there hoops you have to go through to kind of get the funding that you want? And how do you prioritize and figure out what you're going to pursue and how you're going to pursue it? Because I know you represent both Capital Metro
Sure.
and ATP.
Yeah, there are certainly hoops. I'm sure that is probably also the case for our friends on the highway, aviation, and port side. But the bipartisan infrastructure law, now that it has been signed into law, is huge for public transportation in the United States. And we rely heavily in transit, not just on local funding sources, which for Capital Metro, like other metropolitan transportation authorities in Texas and many in the Sun Belt, I would say, on 1 penny of sales tax. Not always 1 penny, but that's the case for us, and I believe Houston Metro, DART, and others in Texas. And that's been very healthy. In a growing region like Austin, it's continued to grow even during the pandemic. But those federal funds are still really critical for what we do on a day-to-day basis on Capital Metro's side of the house. And so formula funding increased by about 26% for transit. So that will go to new bus purchases. We continue to electrify our fleet, as well as general operating funds, maintenance, state of good repair. But it's the huge increase in the FTA's discretionary grant programs that is really critical for transit projects all over the United States, but in particular, a place like Austin, where we passed Project Connect, a multi-billion-dollar expansion program that's essentially building out the system we probably should have started building 20 or 25 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, we've been a large city for a very long time, and we've just failed to admit that fact. I think that's one of the charms, but also frustrations of Austin, is that we've long thought that we were this little quirky college town, and that's not true. We're quirky, but we're a big city. And so the increase in FTA discretionary funds is huge for us, especially at this moment in time. So we are advancing in the FTA Small Starts program for a couple of our bus rapid transit projects that are really in the here and now. So we are certainly prioritizing those. And then we will eventually, we are already in the environmental process and in the project development phase of this, for those of you who have worked around FTA projects before, for new starts for the 2 new light rail lines that we're constructing in Austin. So those are our 2 biggest priorities. The bipartisan infrastructure bill has increased the pot of money. It is certainly going to be very competitive for us. There are other projects, even in Texas, that are going to be going out for some of that new starts money, whether it's in Dallas or San Antonio. I don't know if Houston currently is one in the pipeline. I apologize if they do. But I would say our priority is implementing the programs and projects that the voters have told us to implement. But I know that the FTA's priority, similar to what some of my friends up here have mentioned, has really been a mix of safety and equity, along with just getting the job done, getting these projects built, and getting people hired to build them.
Thank you. Roxana, you want to tell us a little bit about how DFW prioritizes projects and the kind of funding you expect to use over the next few years?
Yes, so speaking of funding, we have there are many entities, right, that you can get funds from, and we are primarily focused on one that is the airport transportation, airport terminal program. It is basically where we kind of make the qualifications in more detail, and based on that, we are expecting to apply for some funds as they come. However, we have a lot of projects already in the pipeline. We have projects that go from $2 million to $250 million, renovating airfield, runways, renovating the facilities, renovating specialized systems that we also have in the airport, like for example, PHA systems, for example, face recognition, etc. Right? So we have, as some of our colleagues said, everything ready, pipeline, and publicized to everybody in YouTube. I can the website and the link if you need it. But definitely it's in the pipeline. We are ready to go already. It's about to be advertised the first, second, and third quarter of 2022. We're ready for this.
Awesome, exciting. Have you guys determined, or how do you make determinations sort of how you're prioritizing projects? Is it both what funds you're receiving for, and how do you sort of determine, what funds are going to be allocated to what project?
Thank you. Again, we look at safety, we look at congestion, we look at growth in the area, and certainly the condition of the roadway itself, if we've got some that are, in need of replacement. Let me just take you down just a quick example. We rank the 100 most congested sections of roadway in Texas at TxDOT. Number one for the last couple of years, you might guess, is, somebody help me, David, West Loop, right? From Galleria. And one of the projects that we have accelerated there is the West Loop at US 59, and that project's going very well and hit a schedule and will help us meet those needs and the transportation needs in the area. So the other thing that we're spending a tremendous amount of time on is safety, looking at where the accidents are, much like you guys, but we're looking up on the, on our freeway systems and on the state highways and interstates between the major population centers. And losing 10 folks today in the state is just, that's not acceptable. And we are staying awake at night thinking about that. Real quickly, I'd like to take you down another path. You guys may have heard of rack 'em and stack 'em if you're close to TxDOT. It's not just, what is that? And it's a catchy name to energize the effort that we have to get our projects ready. We're excited about the additional funds that are coming to transportation, whether it's TxDOT or our partnerships that we have. But we need to be ready, right? Worst thing that can happen is money show up on your door and they say go and you don't have a project in a pipe. So what we did, we brought our DEs in that had project development experience. We locked them in a room. We kept them there for 3 weeks. But seriously though, we did get the ones with project development experience. We went back through our process and analyzed, what we need to do to get a project, ready to lead is what we used to call. Now it's available to lead. And so when the money becomes more readily available, we're going to be ready. We don't want to miss out on the opportunity because we're not ready. You guys look at us and maybe you think a lot about moving cars and that sort of thing. Our projects are becoming more every day, more inclusive of addressing pedestrian elements and those sorts of things. They're very important to us. A lot of you know that if you have a federally funded project, you need an environmental document. Those are very important to us. We've got those processes also going at the same time and spending a lot of time to get the project right and that sort of thing. There's certain constraints in our funding. We can spend the rest of the morning on that. But anyway, we're excited to be part of this team and the partnership, and especially in Houston.
Yeah, and so I want to hear some about the specific projects you guys really are pursuing and want to focus on, and then any kind of impediments or we talked a little bit about some hoops. Sam mentioned a few, and what you see as either problematic or something that is an opportunity. If you want to start.
Sure. So I'll use RAISE as an example. It's out right now. We started when RAISE came out, and we looked at all the projects in our high injury network that we know these are places we want to fix. We also overlaid that with everything on our bike plan, which is for 1,800 miles of high comfort bike facilities. People don't know we already have 500 miles today, which is a pretty sizable chunk, but we have big ambitions to get to 1,800. And then overlaid on those complete communities I mentioned before. So after you kind of sift through all of that, what pops up? But then we saw RAISE, and RAISE has 18 criteria that you have to check to really be eligible to be a good project for it. Many of those match up with our safety projects, our multimodal criteria, our complete communities for equity, but then there are things like project readiness. They use a term, something along the lines of serving neighborhoods of persistent poverty. So then, you sieve all the way down through that, through all the different projects. And then, and I forgot to mention it, they're really looking for something that can be up and ready and finish a full project. I think maybe Cam had mentioned it. And while we have a lot of projects potentially out there, not all of them are exactly at that point, or not all of them will really kind of make that big kind of kicker investment that puts it over the top. So we are right now pursuing a project on Telephone Road, which will go about 5 miles and connect projects already started in the planning by 2 TERSs on either end. So this will be kind of the kicker piece that makes that whole thing one very, very long corridor that serves all of those checkpoints.
Awesome. Sam, have you determined what kind of project delivery model you all intend to utilize for some of your big priority projects?
We're looking at, it's a great question, we're looking at a number of different delivery methodologies. We're advancing our 2 largest projects, which will likely be built in tandem since these 2 light rail lines run together north of the river in Austin before going apart south of the river, but they will share a maintenance facility on one line. And so our intent, and a lot of this is actually going to, it relates back actually to the bipartisan infrastructure law, because we had intended to go out for 2 New Starts grant opportunities for these 2 new light rail lines. We may now have an opportunity to do what's called bundling. It used to be called program of interrelated projects. And so we're still assessing whether or not we're going to be given the opportunity to bundle. We will likely know our delivery model later in the spring, early summer. And we're working through a number of going through internal risk workshops, also working with the FTA to make that determination. I mean, I think that there are a couple of, design build that are out there. I think with the scale of this project, and you had mentioned and asked some of the constraints that are out there for our projects, as well as how we prioritize things. And I think, as I said at the opening, we're really focused. We have values, and we think that transit does great things for equity, sustainability, affordability, creating jobs. But at the end of the day, the project has to be ready. I think right now, in terms of how we prioritize things, it just has to be ready. And I think oftentimes, especially when you have a board that is appointed by elected officials or made up of elected officials, they have very unique pressures. And I completely understand them, especially in my role. But we need to make sure that the projects that go first are the ones that are closest to being ready. We need to make sure that the FTA and our other funding partners take us seriously. And so to that end, there are a couple of smaller bus-related projects. There are a couple of new park and ride facilities that we're going to be going out to bid for this year. But the very large LRT projects are going to be probably sometime next year. And I think one of the biggest constraints, and it's one of the things we're looking at as we figure out how are we going to deliver this in a place like Austin, is labor. It is labor. It is certainly inflation, but it is the availability of labor. And in Austin, that is an enormous challenge. I'm sure that it is in every metro area that you live in. But we're also going to be spending the next 8 to 10 years constructing 2 light rail lines and other transit investments while TxDOT is overhauling I-35. And Tesla just opened the plant. And the hiring spree, especially for jobs that are not ones that you traditionally find in an office or teleworking, is going to be huge. And Austin currently doesn't have a very deep bench for that. So that is something that we're having to work through. Workforce development and finding opportunities through federal as well as partnerships with the private sector for workforce development is also enormous for us. So kind of a mix of your question. I may have taken the answers a little bit out of order, but our priority is readiness. I think our biggest challenges, again, is workforce, and we'll know more in the coming months about how exactly we're going to put those contracts out on the street.
Awesome. Yeah, Kim, I think, yeah. You want to
Sure.
tell us a little bit about this?
Definitely. So I think a common theme amongst a lot of us is what we call shovel-ready projects. And that's what we've been successful with getting recent funding for at Fort Houston. We also have our $1 billion project. It's called Project 11. It's deepening and widening the Houston Ship Channel. So that's really a big focus of ours right now. We have various different segments. We just started dredging, pulling the sediment out of the channel for that. It's increasing safety, efficiency, cargo flow. good environmental benefits as well. So that's something that is really our main focus right now. But we do have a 2040 plan that's on our website as well that has a list of a bunch of different projects that we're continually kind of reprioritizing. And one thing too, as a public agency, say up here as well, David, is we look at what grants are available, especially in the IIJA, and we might tweak a project to fit some of that criteria. Or we might bundle a project with something else to try to make it more competitive. So again, we're consistently reprioritizing, looking at new projects, how we can be competitive, how we can also partner with different agencies as well. So in terms of ports, it's very much a multimodal process and environment. So whether it's rail, whether it's highway, roads, we've done projects with bike paths, bird sanctuaries we've had in some of our projects. So we're very much looking at how we can partner with various agencies because we find that that creates a much more successful project application and a higher level of partnership and then also benefit to the community.
Thank you. Roxana, we heard both Sam and Kim talk about bundling projects and sort of working with other agencies to try to get projects moving and going. How does the FW Airport handle it?
We have an assessment program. Can you repeat it? We have an assessment program that we run every year, and it's recycling every 5 years. So we have a 5-year plan, and with all our footprints, we have hundreds of buildings. What you see when you're in the airport is basically a segment of what the whole entire airport footprint is. We have fire stations, we have police headquarters buildings, so on, all stations, a lot of buildings, right? So we have everything in an inventory, and we go every month with our subject matter experts, which are the SMEs, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and in a team they go to different places, they assess the buildings, and they give us a rating and condition. And based on that condition, if a building is, in a very low rating, we have a higher priority, right? So that's how we prioritize the buildings, and based on those groups, we select, okay, the one that is falling apart is that one. We're gonna go take care of that and make it into a project. So we take a few, or depending on the budget, or the priority, we go and create a project and make it a high priority, medium priority, low priority. We also look at industry standards such as WOMA, which is the criteria that gives us the rating, the life cycle of a building or a system. And based on that, we basically continue doing our cycling and assessment and rating and put those needs that we have into a project, right? So that's how we do it. The other thing that we look at is based on specialty. If we are basically in need of a particular project at that certain time, we of course prioritize it in the highest rating and then just move it forward into a project.
Do you have any specific big projects you're looking to?
Yes, we do have we have a lot of projects that we are looking into right now. One of the main projects is 17 right 35 left, which is a runway on the east side of the airport. We have 7 runways, so that's one of the many. So we're gonna rehabilitate that project in addition to several perimeter projects that are also going on. One of them is a relocation of an electric bolt that basically feeds the runways. So all that is going on right now, and that one is a $121 million project. The second one is probably you have seen is Terminal C expansion. Terminal C expansion is basically under construction right now, but there's a lot more going on. We just did a prefab building and we built it on the side, and then we moved it in a 24-hour. I don't know if you saw it in the news, but we moved it and then we put it right next to the existing Terminal C. It was a high prefabricated building, high technology. We finished that 3 months earlier. It was a big success, and we delivered that to the airline, American Airlines, so that they could finish in the interiors. So it was a great experience. It was innovative, like we were saying in the morning, very innovative. Everybody was so happy, and we are planning to continue doing that again as we need. So that is one of the second projects that we have right now. And we are also renovating the garage. We're demolishing the south side of the Terminal C garage and rebuilding a new one completely new. So those are the bigger ones that we have, they're very, very excited about that. Growing like crazy. The airport, I don't know if you have seen, but just growing like crazy.
So Quincy, TechStot's getting a lot of the federal funding through grants as well as through, allocation. And I'm just wondering how, we talked about safety, that's how TechStot prioritizes projects. But sort of what's on the horizon? How do you figure out what delivery model to use? Does it tie any way to the source of funding, other factors?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we use more than one delivery model. Most of you are familiar with our design bid build model, but we do a lot of alternate delivery, design build projects, and even in our area here in Houston, we did a concession project on 288. The design build projects that you may not be familiar with, Grand Parkway, H&I, and now the one on the east side, F&G. Those are design build projects. Usually when you do design build when the project is bigger and it requires more coordination between the designer and the contractor, and if we need to go a little faster, we can start a design build project and do sometimes the design and the construction simultaneously in different parts, if that's helpful. The biggest part of our project package though is design bid build. We do over 1,000 small projects, $15 million and less in Texas every year, and about 25 very large projects, over $100 million per project each year. So I hope that's helpful.
So David, do you want to talk about the projects that you have going? You've talked a little bit about it, but are there some timelines? Are there things that you're having to address or get done like within a certain period of time to make sure that your project, because I think we all talked about how you have to have it project ready and to go, and then I think there are timelines for completion and things like that, and so how do you stay on track?
So a couple of thoughts on that. Excuse me. There are the timelines that are going to be put down by the grant. So, the funds are available. You have to be able to show that not only do you have a good plan and you've got community support and you're going to hit your goals, how are you actually going to do it, either the project delivery piece as well as how are you literally going to get it done in that amount of time. Very frankly, everybody wants to see open projects. It's much less interesting to have design or under construction projects. People want to see something that they can use. In the planning department, we work very closely with our partners at Houston Public Works. I would be remiss if I'd forgotten to mention that every transportation project in Houston is also a water project in Houston. Every one of our roads moves water one way or the other. So when we talk about timelines, we are very cognizant about every storm season, about every big weather event. I think we heard last night 7 in the last 6 years. Right. Was that it? So there are the official on the books timelines, and then there's the reality of what's going to be going on around us. And we need to be ready and resilient with every project before the next one hits.
Right, and I think Cam, you had some thoughts on that too with the port projects.
Sure, yeah, with port projects, very similar as well. One kind of creative method that we've been able to use to speed up our timelines was actually with Project 11. So we did some pre-funding of certain segments where we actually took port capital and invested while we were going through the application process, receiving funding. We got a new start designation just last January. So it's just been record speed that we've been able to move very quickly, but we've done that because our commissioners actually took the bold step of saying, hey, we want to deliver this nationally significant project as quickly as possible. So we're going to pre-fund the first few segments and actually use our internal capital to do that while we're waiting on the federal matching dollars. Another kind of caveat with a lot of the port projects on the Houston Ship Channel is we work very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. So right now, every year we have to go for operation and maintenance funding to dredge out the Houston Ship Channel, making it deep and wide to its operational depth. So that's something that we're continually going after. Right now, we're also looking at what the core capabilities are, so U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we have to sync up our request for funding with what their capabilities are as well on an annual basis. So there's a strong partnership with that. But really being creative in how we can pre-fund certain projects. We can also, that helps our benefit cost ratios as well when we're applying for federal dollars. So with the IIJA, as I said earlier, a lot of the different buckets of funding we've seen plussed up. So even with the Army Corps of Engineers construction and navigation funding, and then also their operation and maintenance funding, we've seen those increase. So that's something that we're actively going after right now. And then as we saw with the continuing resolution in Congress for the next few weeks, they're starting with the appropriations discussions and debates. And so that's something that we're following very closely because we want to make sure that although these programs were created and directed in the IIJA, funding still has to be appropriated into several of these pots of funding. So that's something that over the next few weeks, keep your eye on in the news, and hopefully they get some appropriations done and we're not continuing on CRs, but we'll see.
Yeah, wonderful. So there's about 15 minutes left, and the panelists wanted to give you all a chance to ask questions. But before that happens, I just wanted to ask the panelists sort of if you have any final thoughts or things that you want to share with this audience that you haven't had an opportunity to say. And if we could start, Sam, with you.
Sure, absolutely. I think I covered probably some of the hands down, the largest thing that Austin has done in terms of a public infrastructure project. And that goes all the way back to if you know, Central Texas goes all the way back to the creation of the Highland Lakes during the New Deal. I mean, even adjusted for inflation, everything LCRA did during that time, which is incredible, is still smaller than the $7.1 billion plus that Austin is about to invest in public transportation. So I think that I've covered that as our huge focus. A lot of our timelines are going to be dependent on federal funding. We are very fortunate that we do have robust local funding and the commitment of our council and other local leaders and our NPO. And I think similar to Port Houston, we've also made it a point to go and do some locally funded projects early. We want to show momentum. We want to get contracts out the door. And we want to get people to these new facilities back on transit and moving again. But ultimately, our largest project, the 2 light rail lines, is going to be dictated a bit by the federal funding process. We are hoping to have our full funding grant agreement in hand for those projects sometime in late 2024, early 25, so that we can be open for business at the end of the decade. I also want to credit Port Houston for having what sounds like your largest capital project, widening and deepening the entire channel and calling it Project 11. We went with Project Connect, a transformational vision for public transportation. I like Project 11 better.
Well, we even shortened it to P11. So. Yeah, so it's funny because one of my first questions when I joined Port Houston was, well, why is it called Project 11? And they all kind of looked at me like, well, it's because the 11th time we deepened the widened ship channel. So, yeah, we finished Project 10. We are already starting to think about Project 12, which is insane to me, but nonetheless, just kind of closing thoughts from Port Houston. One, mainly, we had a program that we launched actually last July, which is our let's see if I can get the acronym right, SMWBE program, Small Business, Minority and Women-Owned Enterprise Program. And so that was launched. It's been many years in the making, very much a high priority for our commissioners at the port. And it's pretty much a kind of a training program, a certification program where if your business is a small business, minority or women-owned business, Port Houston wants to work with you to actually get you kind of pre-certified so you can actually apply to work on projects at the port. So I did bring some flyers with me here. I will leave them up at the registration table. So if you're interested, this gives you a lot of information for contact and how to get started in that. The other kind of closing point I'd make is that a lot of our projects are a result of the demand from the private sector, right? So at the port, we are a public agency, but we operate with both hats on, both a public and private hat, because we really have to go out and solicit business. So our customers are largely the private businesses, the ocean carriers, the BCOs, And so with that, although we have in our mind what we think the projects are going to be for the next 10 years, as we've seen with COVID and the supply chain congestions and whatnot, we've been very fortunate at Port Houston with a phenomenal labor base, phenomenal partners across the board where we've been much less affected than, say, the West Coast ports. But with that, our projects are dictated with what is the demand from the private sector. So that's something to keep your eye on as well moving forward when you're looking at projects at Port Houston.
David, do you have some final thoughts? City of Houston?
Thanks. So I think there's a lot of confusion frequently about what to do for a project and why to do the project. What is physically, what are you going to build? What is it going to look like? And the why gets run over very quickly. What we've learned is if we can really hammer out the why early, we can bring partners in that are all agreeing to the why, and we can move things forward to that purpose and need statement. If you're familiar on the environmental side, it is that why that then with the federal funds or any of the funds come down and they have their criteria, you already have your checklist. Do we match it because we're doing this project for those same reasons? So that very early conversation about why are we doing this is really critical. Don't overlook it.
Awesome, thank you. And Quincy?
Yes, we spent a lot of time talking about technical details of projects with TechSite, and I should have started here first. I'm very thankful on behalf of TechSite to let you know that we have tremendous partners, and we cannot, and we do not operate in a vacuum. In Houston, it starts with our MPO, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, the cities and counties in the area that help select the right project at the right time and also help guide the funding and give us direction and those sorts of things. We have many designers in the room. We use many consultants. We could not deliver this program without those. We also, all of our building contractors, those are private companies that we contract with to do this. The point I'm trying to make is that we work very hard with our partnerships, making it effective so we bring the right project at the right time. The other partner that we have there is our customer, the people that we're serving there with the transportation. Someone mentioned drainage a minute ago. Drainage is such a big thing in our city because of the elevations we have and those sorts of things, the amount of rainfall and that. We're thankful for the counties and the cities work with us when we develop a project. We affect them significantly. It's always a joint effort to make that project right. We've got some work that we're working together downtown on. We didn't talk much about that today, but I'm thankful for the relationships we have there, for the back and forth as we work to perfect the project and get ready, hopefully, to launch that soon. And the input we've got from the citizens and from our partners has been very helpful. We're studying that closely and working to get that project to go.
Thank you. Watson?
Yes, well, I am probably very Quincy, just to thank everybody so much for being here, for coming today, for inviting us, and for being architects, engineers, contractors, constructors, wherever your role is, to deliver and be part of our footprint that this Texas is, because without everybody and the entire team of the community, we cannot do anything, right? So thank you so much for that. And just as a side note, if anybody is interested in partnering with the of you, we have two opportunity forums each year. One just happened in December and the other one is in June. We have it on the website, and if you want, I can send you all the contact person directly. We used to have receptions at the Hyatt Regency in the airport for whoever wants to come and listen to all the projects that we have online. We have it also announced online, and we just are a little engine within the Dallas Metroplex that generates $76 million annually. So we have a lot of projects going on, and we just invite everybody to be partners with us.
Thank you. We have a few minutes, and so we thought we'd just open it up to you all. If anybody has questions for any one of our panelists, all our panelists, anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Joe Everly with Trimble. Thank you so much for all the feedback and insights into your plans and your projects. Quick question around, there built into the IIJA is funds available for digital transformation, which is your technology tax and the choices that you make on the technology side. So many of us in the room are your partners on the technology side. Would you mind giving us some insights or your views on technology and how technology is helping your organizations deliver your projects on budget, on time?
Sure. Thank you for that question. As we learned earlier today, it's all about innovation, right? So technology is definitely a big part of that. We see it as a kind of a two-pronged approach. One is obviously the project deliverables and using technology in various platforms to make sure that our construction projects are on time, they're on budget, we're tracking those properly, meeting all the federal regulations as well. So as a public agency, when we accept those federal funds, we have to provide status updates and whatnot, so that the digital platforms are very beneficial in that. And then we also, kind of translating a little bit in our business industry, blockchain is a very big emerging technology for us with cargo tracking, tracking of containers, updating our private customers, as we've seen with the supply chain issues the last year and a half. That's been a huge benefit, and also a space where many people are looking to invest and make better. So that when you check your Amazon 2-day delivery, you know where your package is. So I'd say for us at Port Houston, it's really those kind of two approaches. One on the project delivery side, and then the other is actual on our day-to-day business. So utilizing the different technology and digital platforms for both of those.
No, I think our business is so different than it was when I started a mere 7 years ago, let alone 15, 25 years ago, because of technology. And it's a wide mix of things. There are just so many more data points, especially in transit, for us to pick up on. And really, I think that there are probably huge parts of our capital project delivery that have advanced because of technology. I would say that the day-to-day operation and the customer experience are where you would feel it the most, at least in the public transportation side of the house. We can do, the way that we do fare payment systems these days, the way that we're able to get a sense of our customers' origins and destinations is so much more precise and scientific than it was, and then that leads to a lot better service planning and ultimately prioritization of projects. And then, of course, on the ops side, there is all of the huge leaps and bounds growth in vehicle technology and propulsion. So technology is a huge part of what we do. I think it's probably a huge part of what everybody does in transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah, just real quick, a lot of technology involved with traffic management. You guys have been over Transtar, you see that. It's ever evolving. There's something new every day. We've got teams of folks working there, our cameras, our sensors, that sort of thing. We've also got folks in Austin that are working with connected and automated vehicles, making sure that we can support that the best way possible, whether it's recharging, sensing, allowing them to talk to each other, that sort of thing. The other thing that we're dealing with is bandwidth and trying to make sure that we, got enough juice to run the system that we have. So thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? I'm sorry, Ken.
I have a question. Thank you. I have a question for David and Quincy. I'm with the City of Dallas. I'm in the Department of Public Works. I'm the Senior Program Manager, Interim City Engineer. You mentioned the main issues you have to deal with is safety, congestion. That's your main focus. So my question is, what are the contributors that is contributing to fatalities and crashes? Are you looking at is it the status of work zones, or is it roadway geometry issues? Is it driver distraction? Driver frustration? What are the contributors?
The main thing that we're dealing with right now is speed, trying to get folks to comply with the speed limits, right? And then obviously distracted driving is a huge thing, not only for TxDOT, but everybody here. Probably if you look around, you see somebody talking on the phone when you leave this meeting in your car. I'd say if we could just get folks to slow down and stay focused, and then certainly distracted driving and the folks that are overserved that choose to use a system while they shouldn't be. That's trouble.
Yeah, I echo what Quincy said. Certainly
Thank you. Thank you. Speed is certainly probably the biggest issue we know. If somebody gets hit by a car, the car is going 30 or less, they've got a really good chance of surviving. Over 40 above that, their chances go way, way, way down. So while we may not be able to stop every crash ever, we know we can help people survive a lot more when we design for the correct speeds. The other piece of that, and something we're really going through in our evolution in Houston, is this recognition that people use all modes. People kind of believe that Houston has always been a car city. That's all anybody ever does. It's not a true statement. But it is time to recognize that there are people walking and biking and taking transit on almost every single street, every single day. And when we see those are people out there, then we're going to start acting a little differently.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. My name is Helen Callier, president of Brad Link, a technical services firm. Thank you so much for mentioning the modular and high sea gates. That was one of our projects, and I appreciate that. Question, David and Quincy, you can chime in with that. For the 1,800 miles you mentioned for the bike trails and so forth, does that federal dollars, do Texas TxDOT dollars go into that, or kind of walk me through the funding for that effort?
You want to start? Sure. So the 1,800 miles is going to come from a partnership of many, many different groups. A lot of it will certainly be the city of Houston through our capital improvement program. We work with TxDOT is doing pieces of it already currently. Metro, our transit agency, they are building pieces. Our TERSs that actually can do construction as well, they are doing it. And then some kind of lesser known but really, really heavy hitting partners like Houston Parks Board. A lot of what has been built today is in our bayous, which is off-street, very high comfort greenways. And they connect the city in a way that was originally kind of imagined as recreational, but it is 24 hours a day, well, most of the day. I can't swear at 3 a.m, you'll see that. Most of the day, every day of the week, of all types of trips. And so if we're gonna build that whole thing, we are relying on every single one of these partners. Oh, and the county, Harris County also is a big piece of it. They are all contributing, not just dollars, but actually projects. So that as we go down our prioritization list, we may get to project 3 and somebody else is taking care of it for us. Wonderful, we'll go on to number 4.
Okay.
I think David's spot on there. We use a lot of federal funds in our work, but it's also very critical that we coordinate with the cities and counties and others in the area to make sure that we understand the needs and work to meet those needs. And also, obviously, the environmental requirements of these projects requires that we do that, and we're intent on doing the right thing.
I think that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank my wonderful panel.